Hey guys, welcome back. We're going to cover chapter 4.2. Okay, this is about evolution. Okay, now evolution by natural selection. What goes on with this? Well, there's some things that happen out in the biological world. Okay, and evolution and natural selection come into play. Okay, with the way species and populations all exist. Okay, now, very important person, Charles Darwin. He was a very important scientist who observed that organisms in a population differ slightly from each other in form, function, and behavior. Okay, he studied a lot of different species and he noted some very important functions and behaviors about these animals. Okay. Now, some of these differences are based on heredity or hereditary. Okay. So, individuals with certain favorable traits are more likely to survive and reproduce. Favorable traits is something that helps you in the environment to adapt. Okay. He used the term natural selection, okay, which is the survival and reproduction of organisms with particular traits. Over many generations, natural selection causes the characteristics of a population to change. So, natural selection lets things kind of evolve more or less over time. So some traits can disappear, some traits can start over time, and through evolution, things change. And what is evolution? Evolution is a change in the characteristics of a population from one generation to the next. Now, for example, where are cactus most likely to grow? North Pole or the desert? Well, clearly not the North Pole. Why? Because they can't adapt to that area. Why do you choose your answer? Well, you know it's going to be the desert because it has favorable conditions. Cactus hold water. They'll turn into ice cubes in the North Pole. They're not going to last. Okay, so nature selects the environment. So Darwin thought that nature selects for certain traits. So, for example, Darwin's finches. This is the coolest thing. He studied finches on the Galapagos Islands, and you can see it in your book on page 104, 105. And the key difference was their beaks. The birds that were able to survive had a very interesting beak. Okay, their beaks were somewhat different shape. And the ones that had the right shape were able to peck the seeds that fell in between the rocks. The ones that had the big, short, stumpy noses couldn't get to the seeds that fell in between the rocks. So the trait of having the big, flat nose wasn't as effective as the pointy nose to reach in and grab the seeds. So the Darwin's finches were a great example of that. Now, also the brown bear, polar bear. Brown bears and polar bears, there was an example I read a long time ago that polar bears basically kind of evolved and were able to adapt to the snowy, wintry climates. Now, if you know polar bears, they're whitish in color, okay, and they're in snow. A brown bear is not going to survive because if a brown bear tries to run up and grab something, the prey is going to see it coming a mile away, whereas polar bears have a little more of a color. A better color, sorry, that they can blend into the environment. Now, colder regions, for example, deer with thicker fur are going to survive or adapt better to more colder conditions. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at this example here with the deer. Okay, so initially, the first picture here shows there's a mixture of brown and light colored deers. Well, the brown ones indicate a deer with thicker fur. Now, over time in the colder regions, some of the lighter colored deer will actually become separated from the herd or the group by accident, by getting sick, getting tired, whichever. A reason to get it away from the other herd, it happens. They don't know. But in the very cold mountain climate, deer with thicker fur are more likely to survive because they can handle the temperature. If they walk away from the herd, they can still make it. All right? So, when the thicker fur deer reproduce, there's going to be a greater amount of offspring that are going to have thicker fur than the thinner fur deer. Okay, so as many years go by, the group is going to go from a population of having a thinner fur to a thicker fur over time. And this is just something that naturally changes. All right, this example is right from your book. Okay, so it's an adaptation to the cold environment. It's how these animals change. Okay, just one example here, the deer. Now, coevolution is pretty cool. We're going to talk about a little bird. Okay, but coevolution is the process of two species evolving in response to long-term interactions with each other. So you're going to have a species that's going to live alongside another species to help live. Okay, they're going to work together in a way. Okay, now this bird right here. Okay, let's take a look at it. Pretty bird, pointy beak, black wings. Okay, this is called the Hawaiian honeycreeper bird. Okay, uses its curved beak to sip nectar from this flower in Hawaii. A bird with a short, stumpy nose is not going to be able to do that. It's not going to be able to make it. So this bird here fits the mold to work with this specific plant. Okay. Now there's other animals like the anemone and the clownfish. They co-evolve as well in the ocean. Okay, now what happens with that is the anemone actually brings food, eats, and some of the food breaks down and lands into the anemone, and the anemone actually has filter feeders and absorbs some of that food. Also, some of the waste from the animal, the anemone absorbs as well, some nutrients, so there's a coevolution there. And the anemone gives the clownfish some protection. They have a chemical in them that other fish can't come near. So they co-evolve with each other. Okay? Now, artificial selection is something that we all experience now or see experiencing this happening. Okay, is the selective breeding of organisms by humans for specific desirable characteristics. Now, one example is corn or plants. Now, corn originally did not look like it does now thousands of years ago. Okay, this is basically the corn that we have now. This is real corn. Ugly. It's not appealing. How many people are going to actually eat this ugly thing? Go to the supermarket. You're not going to choose that. Over thousands of years, people have picked the better tasting ones and also the ones that look better. So the corn has essentially evolved to what it is today. And the same with all plants. They evolve with the help of humans. Okay. Now, dogs as well. Here's another example. Basically, the main dog is the gray wolf. Okay. The gray wolf is the top dog here. And based on geographical locations, there's other breeds of dogs. You have in Europe, North America, China, and India. And these dogs were then evolved into essentially other dogs, okay? By mixing with other breeds, coming together to form a new dog, okay? Cows as well. Cows do not look like they did thousands of years ago. They've been selected for our purpose, okay? Now, evolution to resistance is actually important, okay? Now, what is resistance? It's your ability to withstand something, okay? So it's the ability of an organism to tolerate a chemical or disease-causing agent, all right? Okay, so pesticide resistance is a resistance that insects can develop, okay? So insects can develop a resistance to some chemicals and pass it off to their offspring. Now, what happens is they get used to this chemical, their body absorbs it, and they start having young, and those young are also unaffected by it. So there's companies that make different pesticides to help combat the new generation of insects, like grasshoppers on corn. They're going to specifically have a pesticide for that one specific insect, and they might have to change the formula down the road. Okay? All right. That concludes this lesson of section 4.2.